Matthew McConaughey quit making rom-coms, started making serious stuff. He had to turn down $10 million offers for like a couple of years. That's
Wow.
insane. So I think just
Yep.
like if you can figure out that mindset on your own, and still pay the bills and just know where you're going, it's a better life when you get there. But
Mm.
that is the 0 to 1 is the struggle. So, and it's probably going to take longer than you think.
Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Isan.
And I'm Eric Mertz.
And this is episode 122 of the podcast, and it's July 12th, 2023, as we record this. Our main topic today is we're talking with author and podcaster Brock Swinson about being a prolific writer. So we don't have any new patrons this week, but thank you to our existing patrons for believing in us and in the podcast. And you can go to patreon.com/Valerie Isan, IHSAN, for as low as $1 a month. You can get a postcard for me and a shout out on the podcast, and we can make announcements for you on the air. And at other tiers, the benefits increase. So go check it out. You can also go to patreon.com/Strange Air Stories for short stories in the paranormal mystery genre that Eric has written. Also cool videos that he does on the behind the scenes inspirational stuff. Those are fun. For announcements, another shared lodging ticket just opened up at the retreat for a woman identified person wanting to share a tipi with 2 beds. It's $650 for all the food and the lodging and the coaching, instruction, retreat time, all that. So that popped up again this week. So you can go to valerieisan.com/shopping to get that ticket if you want to. And the retreat is next month. It's August 24th through the 27th. So get on that before that it gets snatched up. And my other announcement is the group coaching cohort from September 12th to December 12th is on sale at my shopping cart, valerieisan.com/shopping. That's going to go from September 12th to December 12th is $500 for those 3 months. So that works out to about $165 a month. And my one-on-one weekly coaching is $500. So you can see the price difference there. So valerieisan.com/shopping. What about you, Eric? You got any announcements?
Yeah. I'm working through the release schedule for the next book. Finally kind of put down pen to paper and committed myself to release dates and pen to paper, not like anything in Amazon yet, but I've got the release dates and kind of the schedule of when I'm going to do things. So
you have a pre-order date or?
Yeah. Our writers group. Yeah, I'm going to do a pre-order. I'm going to get all that in order and really like it's been hard because I want to write the shiny things that are sitting just over the horizon. I want those things. But this had to happen. And so, yeah, I've been spending a lot of time just kind of figuring that out and making sure that I can get the rewrite finished on time. And a lot of it just hinges on when writers group can meet and everything like that. So once I have all that schedule figured out, I'll start putting that stuff out. So, yeah. What about you? Writers update?
Writer's update. I took some time off last week to go to a festival. So I got this rad new hat that's going to probably end up being in a author photo at one point. So stay tuned for that. I'm just starting to get ready for the retreat that's next month. I sent off an email to the guests and I started working on the swag bags and stuff like that. I also created a campaign calendar for myself. Have you done one of those before?
No,
just sort of looking at what I want to promote each month. Because I, have multiple, services and then, so for example, this month I'm going to be focusing on the group coaching option because, September's coming up soon. So I want to make sure that that gets out in the universe. And what about do you have a campaign calendar, Brock?
I feel like I'm just kind of getting into that stuff. So I've been more behind the scenes marketing. I've done some marketing with some pretty big names. I worked at ClickFunnels for a while, so I got to work with like Russell Brunson and Tony Robbins and some of those people. But
Mm.
I'm just now like starting my own projects and putting things out there. I did a prolific writing challenge recently based on my book. Yeah, I like your idea though, and it's definitely even at ClickFunnels where they probably got 10 different courses. We definitely would cycle through them because there are hero products. There is some staleness to it, and just reminding those new people what all you do. I looked at your website; you do got a lot going on, so it is good to kind of create a system with that as far as marketing it.
What about you, Eric? Have you done something like that?
Do I do it? Yes. Do I stick to it? 50-50.
That wasn't the question though. Sticking with it doesn't matter.
Hey, it's
Did you write
Wednesday.
one?
Wednesday's honesty day, right? If this was Thursday, I'd tell you I make it and stick to it, but it's Wednesday. I do. My site just relaunched. My writer site just relaunched. So it's been a lot of, just like what I'm going to market there has been, I don't really have a sense of that yet because I'm still getting everything together. I'm still like getting all of the meta tags and things fixed that didn't happen in the migration to the new site. So I don't know, probably in the fall I'll get into a hard schedule for that. And I'm better with a schedule, but again, like I tend to rewrite the scheduled date of things pretty good. I can go in and say I'm going to do this on September 1st. Now I'm going to do it on October 1st. And so I'm great
So
at
you need
that.
one of those erasable boards for your campaign calendar.
Everything is in
erase.
pencil until it's done, and then it's in pen. So
we like that. Everything's in pencil until it's done. That should be a quote. We should make t-shirts. Writer Craft podcast t-shirts. Everything's in pencil. I did start outlining book 2 of the Focus and Finish series, so that was exciting. Anything
nice.
What about you? Did you do any other? You said you worked with your on the release schedule for the next book.
Yeah, and so part of that was scheduling the rewrite just so I could match the writers group submissions. They're going through it for the 3rd time, and so I'm trying to make sure that the rewrite matches what they're doing. One of my bad writer habits is that I'm often getting feedback on a part of the book that I'm not currently working on. So like they're talking about chapter 19 while I'm like retooling chapter 4. So my goal for the next book is to make sure that I am closer in to that, so like when I'm getting feedback on chapter 8, I might be actually on chapter 8. Yeah. So that's my big goal actually for the fall in the next book, is that I like tie those things closer together. So but yeah, I'm working simultaneously on the rewrite and implementing those notes and loving it.
Did you say last week that you outlined a cozy mystery?
Yeah, this is my spare time. Like, again, the shiny thing, it's right over there. I've been like writing, like I got really hooked on this idea of Kindle Vella, and I thought like, oh, like maybe I'll just like see how many episodes of a cozy mystery I could outline. And yeah, I've got like 12 of them just written out. It's my what did I say? It was a cozy mystery with a time traveler.
What about work? What about you, Brock? What have you been doing?
Yeah, I'm definitely kind of bouncing around. I'm starting on my 2nd book, but it's more like just throwing no cards in a pile right now. It's very early stages. I'm working on a documentary I've been working on for a little while. It's the short story. It's the history of stunt performers in film from like Buster Keaton to today. Like I see your I think it's a Drive poster behind you there. I actually talked to Darren Prescott who did stunts on the movie Drive. So I love the inaction film, the real stuff. So I've been working on that for a while. It'll be like an 8-episode series. That's the first like film I've kind of worked on. I'm writing some screenplays. I got a lot of client work. I'm writing a book with someone. So I like to bounce between like 2 to 5 things. I feel like it's kind of my sweet spot. If I do too little or too more, I'll just kind of get stuck. But somewhere in there, and then every week kind of move the focus and that type of thing.
How long did it take you? I'm already just jumping right in, Brock. How long did it take you to come up with? How did you know that about yourself? About the 2 to 5, like I'm newly working from home.
Right.
full time. So I'm still in this like, what's my schedule going to be? You know, and how did you learn that about yourself? How long did it take you?
I think I overdid it for a long time. Even just listing those, I just probably said like 7 things, but it's, all those are very complicated. So I'm like, I start thinking I'm going to make a documentary. I'm like, oh, 2 hours is okay, but why not 8 hours? Let's just go crazy. Um, I think it's just like trial and error. Really, my biggest thing is like holding back a little bit. I think the actual quote that's in my book is like from Chase Jarvis. He's kind of said he has about 5 things, but it's like one big long project, maybe 2 medium and 2 small. And that's kind of how he thinks about it. I'm more of like trying to put positive constraints on myself of like, you can really only do like 3 things a day. One of those might be outlining a chapter. It could be something smaller. So like 3 progressive things, 3 maintenance things, and that's about it. And that means, in as far as like new items you're working on, you can really only, if you work every day, you can only do 90 things in a month. And most people kind of like, because if I don't put these constraints, I'll try to do 10 things in a day and I'll burn myself out and I might get
Mm-hmm.
them done, I might not. But the anxiety I have all day because the list is so long is like not worth that hassle.
Right.
So if I can get up early and do those 3 things, I might still end up doing, 7 to 10 things, but those other ones are done. So if I want to take the day off or do something else, the most important things are done. And I'm trying to even connect the shiny object thing is very true for all writers, obviously, right? So I'm trying to almost like I print out a document with 90 spaces. If it's starting July, I'm like, I want to get like I'm building a course right now to teach people how to use Upwork. So that's already like a third of my month that I'm going to devote to that. So then they only have so many places left as far as like this like 90 item spreadsheet type thing. So like, is everything that you're adding to this equal value of what you committed to say you're going to do? And I'm trying to think of a more logical way to do it, and that helps me with some of the like, I really just want to go do something else, or I've got this other idea or something like that. So yeah, it's just more like focusing those mornings and putting some like creative constraints on it.
So are your spreadsheets in pencil then, or
This
how
one's
often do
in,
you
so like
change that?
yeah, yeah. I'll print it out. So I had just started doing it this way. I did it in June and I printed out and it had like 45 items in ink and then like 45 blank spaces, something like that. And I do it in pen, but I actually didn't get them all done because went off and did other stuff, because I ended up doing like this and that. But I'm also like, part of that is like, we're talking before this started, like I do have an assistant now. I'm constantly thinking about what I can delegate and like what I don't need to be doing. And
Mm-hmm.
like with this course, like obviously I have to shoot the video content, I have to write, I have to do certain things, but I don't necessarily have to, edit the videos myself and some of those things like that. So I'm trying to think of like what's on this list that I don't really need to be doing. That's like a
Mm-hmm.
big part of that. And I've basically passed like all of my social stuff to my assistant. I'm kind of creating a system around this. I've actually like some other filmmakers and writers I know have like reached out, and we're actually working with some other people too. So we're kind of doing some social branding and marketing for people and trying to just really like, I think writers need to like, if you can pass off as much as you financially are capable of, so you can focus on those things that are most important. And then once you have that free time, you can, still have some shiny object thing here and there.
Be open to like new opportunities that come up. So I
Yeah.
totally jumped the gun. Let's actually go back to our
We're rewinding.
regularly scheduled programming. We like to talk about the books we're reading. So what book are you reading right now?
I've kind of gone back to read through some of Russell Brunson's books because I've been doing the marketing thing. I've been thinking more about that. So you wrote like .com secrets, and there are a lot of like marketing type stuff like that. I'm also reading I'm trying to book a call with Rich Cohen. He's like one of my favorite authors. He wrote books about like the Cubs, and he wrote a book called Banana King. And I'm kind of doing this research because I'm ghostwriting a book about food exports, imports with someone right now. So that's why I kind of led down that trail. But I love Rich Cohen's work. Like every now and then, like I feel like every other chapter he'll have some line that just like sticks with me for like days or weeks or something like that. So I'm really curious about his process. And luckily having a podcast, I can kind of reach out and try to pick his brain and everything. So
It's legit. You're not just a weird
yeah.
creeper fan.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What about you, Eric? What are you reading?
I am reading Men at Arms, Terry Pratchett's the
The
second book.
palate cleanser.
The palate cleanser, right? You go through Cormac McCarthy, you get some Terry Pratchett on the other side. Um, yeah, it's like the second book in the City Watch series in Discworld.
Okay.
It's so fun. It's ridiculous. It's
Are
just
you
what I
on the
needed.
are you on the wait list at the library for Stella Mars?
Actually, I have it. I just got it, so I'll be jumping in. It's already tempting. It's like I already had that flavor of book, but I want more. So
Cool.
I'm still thinking about it. I'm still thinking about The Passenger. It still crosses my mind, even though the book is out of my life. It's just, it's not out of me. So
that's what every author wishes to hear, I think, like you want to be able to stick in someone's mind and have them
I think
chew on it
Cormac
later.
McCarthy's heard that a bunch in his life. That sorry, you don't read The Road and then like just forget it and put it down. So
yeah.
To Cormac, wherever he is. What about you?
I just finished reading Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune and The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. Those
I
are
love that
both
book.
The Hazelwood?
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
You read it?
Such a great book. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I
Would you
devoured it.
consider that wide? Would you consider that YA?
Somebody told me it was YA, but I
didn't think
don't
so
know.
either. If it really read the main character was a high school student, I guess, but she didn't ever come across like that at all.
The storytelling was just fantastic.
It was. I finished it last night. It was awesome. I really liked it. And so I'm also listening to the audiobook stuff that comes in and out, so I'm listening to A Most Agreeable Murder by Julia Seals. So it's like a Regency murder mystery. So that's what I'm reading. Oh, plus Rich as Fuck. Still reading that. I'm doing it slowly because I'm doing all the journaling prompts that go with it and stuff.
Right.
So that's what I'm reading. All right, so let's actually get into the interview, Brian.
There we go. The little teaser was just a teaser.
The teaser.
Now we're into the real thing.
Nice. So you, as we just spoke about, do many things all at the same time. You're a podcaster and an author, and you also are the editor of, I think it's called Creative Screenwriting. Is that a magazine or?
Interviewer, yeah. So it was a magazine like back in the day. Like it was pretty big in LA. I mean, they would do Christopher Nolan and Tarantino and some of the bigger stuff. It's since moved to a website, as most things have. But I've been there for probably over 10 years now. So that's where some of the bigger interviews come from. Somewhere in the middle of that, I kind of pitched in the idea of what do you think about turning this? We had all these great audios. We're recording the interviews and using them that way. And so what do you guys think about, I'll host a podcast for us. They actually just said, you know what, you can keep them, use them as you want to. So that I write for creative screenwriting, but I started Creative Principles, and I wanted it to be more than just screenwriters. I want to talk to authors and musicians and actors and directors. So I'm over 400 episodes now. I've been writing for them for about 10 years, and I am hosting a YouTube show for them now too. Where we kind of break down I interviewed Edgar Wright, who wrote Shaun of the Dead, and we'll do an episode based on some stuff he said in the interview. I'll show some clips. And this is our most recent episode. What's it like to write the first 5 pages of a screenplay based on his work? So we'll kind of analyze things like that with my writing partner. So I write some work myself, and I write horror movies, stuff like that, with a writing partner. And we're still kind of trying to break in. So the documentary is meant to be a launching point. Then I've got some other scripts I'm trying to sell in addition to that.
So would you say that you're mostly well, no, I was gonna say, would you say you're mostly a screenwriter? But no, because you just came out with the book Ink by the Barrel, which is nonfiction. Yeah,
I would say, my big, the big dream or the goal that I'm finally kind of pursuing now. I've been more of a behind the scenes marketer. I've been a ghostwriter. I've written 10 books as a ghostwriter. So I've been doing all kinds of stuff in that world. Marketing definitely pays the bills, and then this is my first book. Actually, I'm giving it away for free, kind of just to show some authority out there and put my name out there a little bit. But the big goal would be to make films and maybe write a book every 2 years, something along those lines. That's where I'm running full speed now, the best I can to some degree.
So your film.
That sounds very familiar.
Yeah. You are Eric. I think you guys are twins, sort of.
We need to talk offline. This all sounds very familiar.
So your screenwriting, did you say it was horror that you?
So I think I write horror like with a partner, but I write more along the lines of maybe like Taylor Sheridan or something along those lines. Like I've got a script that's floating around now. It's like 1920s bootleggers and how that led to NASCAR in North Carolina. And I'm writing a new
Oh
one
my.
that's kind of about stuntman and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm writing one that kind of pairs with it. It's like it's basically there's a show called The Wild Wild West. You guys might be familiar. Robert Conrad had a show. I'm kind of writing a behind the scenes of how that show came to be. What's interesting to me about it is it's the first series. This was like 1965. They didn't hire stuntmen who looked like actors. They hired actors who looked like stuntmen. So it's more important about the
Mm.
action. So I love that idea. And I'm putting kind of a cowboy spin on that.
So then is this nonfiction or like a documentary, or is it fiction?
It's like historical fiction, I guess, is
Okay.
what it would be most like. Yeah,
Okay. Oh, that sounds really interesting. Cool.
yeah,
Um, in your book, you said reduction. We're talking about prolific writing here. That was kind of the
yeah,
topic that I wanted to like steer towards, but we're gonna go all over the
yeah.
place apparently. So you said reduction is the first step to becoming a professional writer. So can you say more about that? What does that mean to
Mm.
you?
Yeah, part of it's kind of what we were saying, like those creative constraints, like putting some limitations on what you plan to get done. Because really, like same way as people might talk about career athletes, you really need to be thinking about long term with writing. That's really how I think about it. It's like you get to quality through the quantity, and I plan to be writing until I'm 100 years old. Like that's kind of the goal. So how can I do that? How can I not overdo it now? So putting those positive constraints on that. The other part is it's a big thing in the book that I've seen a lot of people struggle with is like separating the internal writer from the internal editor. If you're critiquing yourself too much while you're writing, you're never going to get anywhere. So part of it is like putting those positive constraints and then also understand what hat you're wearing at what time,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to invite in that criticism. You're not really going to get enough words on the page to just get to the next level. And I think a lot of early writers struggle with that. And film writers want to be the next Tarantino, authors want to be the next JD Salinger, and it's like you're putting yourself, setting yourself up for failure. You really need to think more about like, I want to publish and ship, I think is like Seth Godin would say, as opposed to like try and, change the world with something. I think to change the world, it's just going to be you writing a lot of material and then finding books and different pieces that connect with people.
Cool. And then so on your podcast, that's the Creative Principles podcast. Is the YouTube show the same name, Creative Principles,
I,
or is that a different name?
Well, can we
I
before
had
we
one
jump in
for a
there?
while. Yeah, yeah,
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sorry.
Um,
I'm just taking
uh,
over.
no, it's fine. It's fine. I think I want to take over too.
Okay.
So what you're talking about, like getting rid of that internal editor, you're talking about, kind of finding your voice, which we talk about a lot. I'm dying to know how many books and screenplays you have in your drawer that you had to get through to get to this place where you're confident that you're not trying to write like Tarantino or trying to write like somebody else, that you're writing like you. Um,
yeah,
you must have been through, gone through a lot.
yeah. I mean, I think so to examine like the two worlds I kind of dip in and out of, like I wrote books as a ghostwriter. I've probably written 10 books as a ghostwriter, including one like 3 or 4 months ago that hit #2 on the Wall Street Journal list. So that was almost like my apprenticeship of like, I'm writing in someone else's voice to figure out my voice as a writer. And that's honestly like, I think a lack of confidence is why my first book has so many quotes in it. I wrote it in a very like quote centric way to be barred authority and everything else. Screenplays, though, I felt like I hit kind of early as far as like getting some attention. So my version is like I carried this character around in my head in college for like probably 3 years. The short version is like he was a 19-year-old pickpocket who bounced around from different universities and posed as a student. And if you can take people's wallets like that, you can go into any room, any building, sit in classes. You can kind of just be there without paying. And it was kind of an idea about the college and everything else. So I wrote a very like Judd Apatow centric style thing as that was popular in 2005, 2006. I carried this guy around for 3 years. I spent less than a week writing a 120-page movie, and it was terrible. I threw it away. The first 5 pages turned into a TV show over a slower period. I sent that out and got a little bit of attraction. Actually, one of the guys who produced Ted Lasso gave me some notes on it, which was like very encouraging. I think since then though, like that was probably more of a Ted Griffin Ocean's 11 style. And at some point, like I ask a lot of writers this too, is like I feel like I'm a parent now, just things change in terms of your life. And like things that I write about now are more along the lines of like maybe Paul Schrader or something like that. They're a lot darker. I talked to a guy named Scott Teams, and he said the phrase something like, I write movies about violence and religion in the South. And I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I do. And it kind of gave me like a little North Star. And I started leaning into that more and just understanding that like I'm obsessed with underdog anti-heroes that are barreling towards a violent catharsis. And like that's almost everything I write. And like if you look at his
Mm.
work, that's what he writes. So like knowing that very clear line, that kind of helps me like, and having a partner helps some degree too, even though we write a little bit different. I'm talking more about my personal writing work. Having a partner kind of showed me that like no matter where we start, we talk about the same 10 movies, so we know very much like what we want to write about, even though it's like we're trying to do something else in the beginning. I interviewed a lot of stand-up comics, and I like try on other voices until you find your own voice, and you just I think it's really just like stripping things away, and that's kind of where you
Right.
end up. And like, okay, this is what I like, this is what I'm obsessed with, this is what I write, even when I'm trying to write something else. So like, that's clearly what I
Hmm.
want to write about, you know.
Yeah.
I want to write that down. So you try voices until you find your own.
Yeah,
And what was the last thing that you just said?
I think just like stripping away those
Yeah.
things that are not yours, you know, as part of it and everything.
Yeah. I go through actually, I'm in the process of getting ready to move, and I've been going through and getting rid of old files. Like, I'm never going to write that story. I'm never going to write that story. And
Yeah,
it's been interesting because I've been just seeing all the different voices I've tried on stories that I thought I was, again, I could almost probably go back if I could. There was probably a book or something I read at that time
yeah,
that like influenced me to try to write that. And yeah, it's just been a fun exploration to see like it took me this long to get here. Because I like what you describe about that through line. Like, I write this character. This is what I love to write. And
yeah.
um there's a lot in there. You know, it's not, I think a lot of authors get afraid to focus on that because it sounds limiting, but you could do a lot with what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at scripts, I mean, every movie is about 120 pages. Look how many different movies there are, right? And there's people like Tarantino is obsessed with revenge in the 70s. That's what kind of movies he makes. The movie that won the Oscar a few years ago, Parasite, that was that director's probably like seventh or eighth film about class warfare. He's just like obsessed with that idea, and that eventually won him the Oscar. And I think like, I don't know, not everyone's going to be that way, but that's the most authentic voices, I think, at least in filmmaking, is that writer director. I mean, all the Cormac McCarthy stuff is definitely within a very, you know, you
Yeah.
could say limiting, but that's who he is, you know. So I think, yeah, I think everyone who's really looking for that voice, you're going to end up with like a pretty tight window of what that is. And then all your decisions are a lot more binary. It's like, well, I'm this, I'm not that. And it's a lot easier to kind of figure out which direction you want to go.
Right.
This is really good information. I'm like frantically taking notes. I don't know if you can hear the typewriter clicking, click, 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 click. I hope I can edit that out. But yeah, because that is something that new authors and intermediate authors, I've published four books. And I also still don't feel like I have that voice settled down yet. I don't know what it is yet. So I like the idea of, I mean, this is good information, just being able to, what is it that you're obsessed about,
Yeah.
and what is it that you end up writing about all the time, even if you're not trying to write about it, and
Yeah.
where your ideas are coming from. So this is good. I like
And I think
this.
it adds something to the whole write what you know principle that we're told, but I don't know if that really, I don't think we should limit ourselves to what we know. Like, if it's what keeps you up at night, if class warfare is what keeps you up at night, that
Yeah.
might be your path to writing an Oscar winning film. And so,
Yeah, some of writing is figuring out what you think you know. I think when you start to get on the page, you start to kind of see a little bit more clearly of like what that is and everything else.
yeah.
Yeah, the writing, which I've said this to a few people, and I feel like I've gotten mixed responses from it. But I see like write what you know is about theme, and the plot is something that you use to sell the book or the movie. Like that can almost be anything. So I think the write what you know is like I write father son stories or something along those lines. And then the other part is like you can go and do research all you want to about historical fiction or whatever it is. I think the write what you know is more about theme though than plot
Mm.
necessarily.
I could see that.
Yeah, that does. I've never heard it said that way, but I do like that. That does make a lot of sense. On your podcast, you talk to other creatives about their habits and routines and methods of creative life. Were you ever surprised by anything anyone said, or is it just mostly common sense when it comes to writing prolifically? And
I
what does
think it's
prolifically mean
yeah,
to you? Like, is that like
yeah.
an individual thing,
I
or
think
should it
it's
be?
just like writing and planning to write the rest of your life. And I even kind of said, like, talking about the book, like, there's probably ideas in the book that kind of juxtapose each other. That probably like go against each other because I'm using so many examples. And what works for you may not work for me. What works for me now may not work for me in 10 years. I think you should be kind of shifting in terms of your habits and everything else. I guess sometimes I'm surprised because I'll say, "Well, you probably do this, right?" And they'll say, "No, I don't do that at all." And I think it's just like a totally different. One thing in the book that's like probably the most common is like I talk about this conversation between George R. R. Martin and Stephen King, and like Stephen King
Oh, I love, yeah.
is the like playful trickster, and George R. R. Martin is the tortured martyr, and those are two styles you can kind of choose. Almost everyone's a tortured martyr. I honestly think playful tricksters aren't listening to podcasts like yours and mine. I think they're just off writing. I think there's probably three of them in the world. There's not that many, in my opinion. But I think like that leads me into outlining and everything else. I'm always kind of surprised when someone tells me they don't outline. I'm always surprised that you can do it at a professional level. I think it's the romantic idea. um, I've definitely done it, but I don't know. I don't think when I think of being prolific, I think of like creating systems that are going to work for a lifetime. And if you can do it and there's no troubles, do it. You're probably honestly not reading books about writing and stuff like that anyway. So you're probably just out there writing. But I think at a professional level, especially in writing, in screenwriting, if you're going to write for a TV show, they're going to want to know what your system is. If you're going to get a book deal, they might want to know what your system is too, unless you've already had some success. So it gives a little more credibility for those like gatekeepers that are out there. And I don't necessarily encourage people to only pursue those routes. I don't pursue those routes. I look for like self-publishing. I'm making my own movie and I'm going to go sell it later. So whenever you can do your own thing and kind of go around those, especially in the beginning, I think that's super important as well. It's just like when you're talking to someone and you tell them, "Hey, I'm going to go and get this movie made or write this book. If you want to be a part of this, that would be great, but I'm going to do it whether or not you're coming with me." I think that's such a strong stance to have today as creatives because we have the technology to do it relatively cheaply. It's just having that mindset that's like, you're really going to go for this like full speed.
So I was going to say, what are your systems? But we've really talked about that. So you write the spreadsheet with the 90 things, and you bounce around between 2 to 5 different projects just based on, I guess, your interest level on that day, or what you want to plan on for the 90 days or the 90 things, or
Yeah, and to get a little more
and you
concrete,
outline.
like yeah, I definitely outline. Like when I wrote Ink by the Barrel, I kind of follow Ron Holiday's like note card system, which he got from other writers as well. But like I said, now I'm writing a book now. I think I know what the title is, and I'm everything I read.
Hmm.
I just take notes from all the books I'm reading, put them on 3x5 cards, and throw them in a pile, and then later I organize that. And I'm like, that's just the commonplace book, is what he calls it, and that turns out to be the book. It's a little bit different because you get to actually take action though, as opposed to like trying to figure everything out and then starting at a blank page all the time. Movies are a little different, but movies have these other positive constraints where, like the first movie I wrote with my writing partner, we spent 6 weeks coming up with 100 horror idea prompts. Like, what are hooks? What are interesting movies we've never seen before? We narrowed it down to 10. We sent those 10 to people that we know who love horror movies. They kind of gave us their opinion, and we picked the one that we liked the most. And that was like that approach to that. And then we can go and study that. You ever seen like this movie is like, you know, Drive meets No Country for Old Men or something like that. You have those parameters of like, okay, they've already done this for us. There's already footprints there. So you get to kind of brainstorm and put these things out, but then you can look to the tent poles in this other film or other movies like this, or this character is like this. What did he do? And kind of figure out what those pieces are, and then start to really put your creative spin on it. But you're not like getting stuck. Everybody gets stuck in the second act. A lot of people do anyway. If you don't have some type of system to follow and some North Star of like, I know the beginning, I know the end. This is how we're going to get there.
Nice. How many systems do you think you have?
I think I have one for each category that's constantly, hopefully upgrading, but definitely changing. I think it's more along those lines. Like, and then like I recently talked to this guy named Jordan Morris. He's a screenwriting coach out of Canada, and he kind of gave me a new perspective on. I just did an interview with him yesterday, so we'll publish it in a couple weeks probably. He kind of gave me just a different spin on like how to think about characters, because a lot of screenwriting books are really dull and boring. And like, as you probably know, like you're a coach, so when you talk to someone, working with a coach is almost like having a therapist. Like I could go read self-help books all day, but they're not going to say, "Hey, you're not really doing this one thing." Like for me, I'll think of movie characters and they're too developed. There's not enough transformation in the character across the film or TV show. And I don't think I would have seen that without talking to someone else about it, you know? So I
Mm,
think that's a big thing there. But, and then also like learning it's called the Story Forge method, like kind of learning. We just spent like an hour. He kind of gave me a practice session before our interview. And I'm like, oh, this is like a new lens to watch movies. Like it's a whole different experience. Like when you have a different system in place and you're looking for certain things you've never seen before.
mm.
But I think it's like it'll change your own work, but also change the way that you read and take in and consume other creative work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've noticed that too in I read the book by Sasha Black, The Anatomy of a Bestseller, and the way she talks about deconstructing story and asking questions about the passages that you just love, love, love. I find myself when I'm reading fiction now, finding those little nuggets of, oh, I love that sentence. How did she make that? So yeah,
Yeah.
I can see what you mean by looking at it, through a different lens.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that.
I'm curious. So as someone who does, I'm similar boat. Like I have projects that are mine that I'm writing for me, and I have projects I'm writing for other people. Like, how do you balance that out? Like, I separate my day. Like, so I have half a day here and half a day there. But how do you manage to keep yourself sane from bleeding over,
Yeah,
those kind of things?
it's definitely like totally different. It's something like I feel like it's like the AA where you're constantly every day is a fight to do your own work and not do other people's work because you have so much accountability and deadlines and everything else, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
I'm writing a book with this guy now, and like I'll pitch him an outline, and we'd kind of come back, and then he wrote me a new one, and I'm trying to like what makes the most sense. The other thing I think we all probably do too is like you give yourself short windows because yeah, you're probably capable of doing a chapter a week, and then also doing your other thing and this and that. I try to extend those windows a little bit, especially for other people's work. But it does kind of go back to like my 90 things is definitely a balance of what I want to do and then what I'm getting paid to do. And some people kind of categorize it. So they would like list things out, highlight the ones that make you money, highlight the ones that you're passionate about, highlight the ones that are this and that, and figuring out what that looks like. And it should be pretty equal until you're at a point where the things you love are the things that make you money. And like I'm not quite
right,
there yet. I'm inching at it. And whenever you get a little taste of it, you're like, oh, I need to be doing this. So like I told you
right.
guys before the show, we spent like 3 weeks at the beach in the last like month. And I've really reduced like what I've been doing. So I get up super early in the morning. I work 3 or 4 hours on whatever the most important things are, and then really try to spend a lot more time with family. And it's whenever you can do those things, it's making me rethink all this again and again, and constantly fighting for, okay, I know what I want to go. How do I get there? And just kind of go in that direction and be flexible about your approach. But I think it's all like fighting for that schedule until you get to the point where you're happy, and then I'm sure you're going to want to adjust it some more. But it's just yeah, it's just kind of a struggle for sure to do
Yeah,
that. I mean, yeah.
I
yeah.
remake my
I think
schedule
of it.
all the time. that
Yeah,
that
Yeah,
that whiteboard, like
yeah,
reinventing myself all the time. So I finally came up with one that works fairly decent. And I promised myself that I would stick to it for 30 days before I tweaked it again, because I tend to
yeah,
tweak before I get enough data to know if it's actually working or not. So I'm
yeah,
constantly like pinballing all over the place, which is not efficient, which means not prolific.
yeah. Generally it's like do less but better. Like that's kind of the old Stoic saying or
Work harder,
whatever. So I
not
mean,
smarter. Work
yeah,
harder, not smarter. That's
right.
mine.
Yeah, that's it.
Work
Yeah,
smarter, not harder. There we go.
work all day in circles. Yeah, okay.
That's the other t-shirt.
Yeah.
Work all day in circles. What's that Oscar Wilde quote he edited where he talks about like in the morning he put a comma in a sentence and in the afternoon he took it out?
Yeah.
That's what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that's hard. I think for a lot of people, whether or not they're working a side hustle as a writer or they're doing that, they're working 9 to 5 at a day job and they want to make their side hustle more profitable, but they have to pay the bills. So I think that's something everyone can relate to, is that like you get a little taste of it, you get a sale, it inches you closer, it gives you more fuel. How do you deal with that? Like you talked, I saw a little temptation. That's where I get temptation. Like I can put my client work aside for this afternoon because I got that little crack of light. Let's go toward that light. Like, how do you, I mean, being realistic, like, is it hard for you to stay regimented, or is that a system you have down internally?
I think it's more like I probably personally, whenever I try to do like, I'll do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this in a given day, it doesn't work. I'm more like, I can focus 2 or 3 hours on one thing. I've tried to like not do any client work on the weekends. That's when I do some of my personal work. Part of the initial reason I hired an assistant, in addition to like delegating, is like I'm gonna tell her, hey, I'm gonna get this thing done on this day, and it's like just it's a form of accountability.
Accountability.
It's
I like
similar to
that.
like having an account, having like a client or whatever. But like, yeah, I'm so envious. I've heard Seth Godin say he never breaks a promise to himself. I'm not there yet. I think that would be like
Yeah.
the wildest, ambition, which is crazy because as I say it out loud, I'm like, well, you can totally do that. Just do it. But it's like, that's the daily fight, I think, so yeah, like when I say I'm writing this next book, I'll throw over 500 note cards in a pile basically, and then I'll spend like 60 days writing it, and that'll be my main focus. Um, the longer, the documentary I'm working on now is a bit harder. It's like it's harder because I do have to like get certain things done every week. Um, some things I do, like I just worked with this guy named Pace Morby for about a year. We did a lot of stuff together. He looks at his like followers as his accountability. So he has all kinds of people on his team, but because they're going to be there, he's going to deliver certain things very, very often. And I'm kind of thinking about that way. Some of the writers I work with are doing some similar things. They're just trying to get things out to the audience. And but I think it's some form of accountability, unless or until you figure out how to never break promises to yourself. And really, that can be small things. I think like it's as small as like if you look at the Atomic Habits and some of those, as I promise myself I'm going to get up at the same time every day. These little bitty things are stacking up, are just more and more proof and evidence that you are who you want to be, your future self, and you're kind of going in that direction. So as soon as you can just start keeping those little promises to yourself, I think the bigger ones will kind of follow it up. And then, ideally you are going in that direction. I mean, it's like a line in the sand though. And like I heard like when Matthew McConaughey quit making rom-coms, started making serious stuff, he had to turn down $10 million offers for like a couple of years. That's
Wow.
insane. So I think just
Yep.
like if you can figure out that mindset on your own, and still pay the bills and just know where you're going, it's a better life when you get there. But that is the 0 to 1 is the struggle. So, and it's probably going to take longer than you think. But I think it's really just a mindset issue though. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So figuring out what that is and kind of keeping promises to yourself on a small level and stacking those up. The same as like, I've probably written like 7 movies and TV shows. Every time I write one, even though I haven't officially sold one, I get different forms of feedback and outside whatever. But internally, every time you lay one down, that's more evidence that you are who you say you're going to be. I think about that with books and scripts and prose and everything else.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Like you've written these things and maybe you haven't sold them, but they all affirm your path, where you're going, what you're becoming.
Yeah.
Like I'm actually also reading The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, and there's a lot of his messages, if it is just that, like put things down, figure out what's important, the outcome, the sale outcome or the big hit outcome is not what you're working towards. You're working towards, your voice, your taste, like, knowing who you are as a creative. And I think people miss that. Like,
Yeah.
I think people, it's easy to overlook that because we are like in a capitalist society that values financial
And
outcomes.
it kind of comes back to what prolific means to me is I'm going to keep doing these things regardless of success or failure. Like that's kind of how I think about it. It's very like process oriented. I did when I first started kind of promoting the book, I did this challenge. I had like 1,000 people sign up, and I made like a 30-day video companion with the book. And the whole point was just to like teach people that have never really done it, just to write every day for 30 days. I don't care if it's 2 minutes or 20 minutes or 4 hours, probably more the less time. But I would tell them to just focus on time, because when you focus on like, especially if you're brand new, I'm going to write 500 words today. I'm going to write 2,000 words today. It's so hard. It's so difficult as someone who's brand new, and then do it every day for 30 days. But if you're just like, I'm going to write, which might mean you're staring at your computer for 20 minutes, you can probably do that for 30 days. At the end of that, you're going to have something. It might not be what you want, but then you've got some of that credibility. Like, well, I've done it before, I can do it again. I think people see the same problem. You know, there's a success, there's a problem or a curse of success sometimes. When you hit too early, what do you do next? Harper Lee never really published another book. It's monumentally successful, but then how do you follow that up? You know, so I think just like knowing your process, and the results will come, but don't really worry about the results. Like focus on what the process is, and that's what's going to make you a prolific writer.
Awesome. Well, we're
Yeah,
almost out of time. Is there
if you
anything
don't
else
love
you
the
want?
process, if you don't love the process, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to ask, Eric?
We could go on for another 2
We
hours. I'd
could,
be
yes.
just fine. But I
Yes.
think that
But we all have stuff to do. So Brock, why don't you tell people where people can find you, or talk about projects that you want eyeballs on?
Yeah, we're starting to kind of share some of the podcasts on Reels and stuff like that. Everything's at Brock Swinson on Instagram and Twitter. If you go to brockswinson.com, I'm giving away my first book, Ink by the Barrel. Our goal is to give away 100,000 copies this year. That's the PDF and audiobook. So all that's for free. Just go sign up at brockswinson.com. The movie I kind of briefly mentioned, the documentary, is called Daredevil Society. You can go kind of see a teaser to that. I've had a few people pledge. We've raised almost $20,000 to kind of get that started. So that's something we're happily working on right now as well. So that's Daredevil Society. Everything else will be at brockswinson.com.
At brockswinson.com. Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much for talking with us today. It was super interesting.
thank you.
And
Thank you.
I hope we'll see you in the world. I've downloaded the book, so yay. Thanks.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Bye for now.
Goodbye.